Welcome to this conversation about zero waste. My name is Sarah Reith, and I'm the Priest Associate for Justice Ministries at St. Paul's Episcopal Cathedral in Buffalo, New York. And I will be speaking with my trusted colleague, Bob Ludwig. Bob?
Hi, I'm Bob Ludwig. I'm a member of Sarah's Social Justice Action Team, and I am a 35-year member of St. Paul's Episcopal Cathedral in Buffalo. And we have embarked in the past year, the Social Justice Action Team, on a number of attempts to bring our faith into the realm of social justice. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Thanks, Bob. Well, I've been looking forward to this conversation with you, and I've been reading and hearing a lot about zero waste. In fact, in today's Buffalo News, there was an article about zero waste recipes using citrus fruit. And one of which is a knockoff of a trusted and treasured recipe that I use with clementines to make a cake. And then in my world of sewing, there are many, many people who are developing what's called zero waste patterns, so that when you lay out your pattern pieces, there's not a scrap left. It's very intriguing and exciting to see how folks are trying to reduce what gets tossed. And so I'm wondering if you could talk, please, about when you talk about a zero waste church, what does that mean?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I don't know the full answer, that's for sure.
Okay,
But
well,
I
we're all
did
learning.
Yeah, we're still learning, and learning, of course, is the name of the game for what social action justice should be doing. We often fail to appreciate the complexity of the world, and things you think are going to be actions that help turn out either to be ineffectual or counterproductive, unless you've really deeply prayed about it and thought about it. What happened with me was I had early on, when the National Church, Episcopal Church, had decided to have a climate covenant, I saw the zero waste be mentioned. I then went online and looked at churches which were doing this. And I found several websites, and each of them seemed to have an index, a clue to the fact that it had been a burst of enthusiasm and that maybe it wasn't really being followed through on. The dates were a little made you leery. It's 2016 and for the most recent post, for instance, or something like that. You said, wait a second, it's 2022, or when I was looking at 2021. And so I said, I don't really think I want to follow up with them too closely because they don't seem active enough. And then completely independently, my son moved from Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. up into Chevy Chase. And so the church I had been going to when I visited him and his family was not really the close one to him. And so I looked for close churches, and lo, I came upon St. Columba on Albemarle Road, just off Connecticut. And they had a very powerful website with all kinds of things going on, ministry to the homeless, and an environment committee. And they billed themselves as a zero waste church. and all the postings were recent. One of the concomitant features was that they had 3,200 parishioners. So I said, whoops, for St. Paul's Cathedral in Buffalo, that's a lot of people.
Mhm.
I wonder.
So in
what
other
it-
words, so naming themselves as a zero waste church didn't send people away by the thousands.
No, it didn't, right. But we were in the midst of the pandemic, and so this was last fall. I said, I'm not going to visit them right now, my family, David, and I'll wait, because I proposed to Sarah and to other members of the Social Justice Action Team the possibility of St. Paul's undertaking the Zero Waste Challenge. And we have, St. Paul's Cathedral has a feeding the street people ministry, feeding and clothing them. And there's a lot of waste in it. And one of the members of the Social Justice Action Team is a regular participant in the weekly feeding program. And he was pretty unhappy about the waste and said, maybe we can change this, and we have styrofoam cups that we were using at coffee hours when we were having coffee hours after or before the main service. So I said, well, shortly before I go to Washington the next time, I will make an appointment to see whether someone would be willing to talk to me and show me around St. Columbus. That visit is coming up in April in several weeks. And so I asked by writing an email to the two people who are the leaders of the Environment Committee. And the leaders of the Environment Committee did not respond to me. They asked Thelma Thrice, who is a person who led the Zero Waste campaign, to be my responder. She responded and gave me an appointment. And she also sent 2 documents. And the documents are wonderful in terms of giving an overview of what might happen at St. Paul's.
I'd like to just ask if you could stop for a moment, please,
Yeah.
Bob, because I want to rewind to the member of the Social Justice Action Team who commented about the amount of waste at the feeding ministry. And I'm wondering, do you have an idea of what that member was noticing? What was being
Yes.
wasted? Food
Well,
or
it was the
what
bag, it was the packaging,
packaging?
the packaging of the food that's being given away. And it's something that bothers anyone who has done much takeaway. I personally have done an enormous amount of takeaway because I shifted my practice of going to a cafe and having lunch to going to that cafe and taking it away.
Taking away the lunch.
Taking away lunch. So you get an enormous number of uncompostable boxes. You get an enormous number of plastics and the tools associated with them. And
So,
that was what, yeah, go ahead.
So that's what our member was talking about, was that
That's what he
kind
was
of
talking
waste.
about. Yeah.
So what can you tell us that you know so far before your trip to Washington and meeting with Ms. Thelma about the Zero Waste Church there, St. Columba's? What have you learned about what they're doing?
Well, I
And how
learned
they
from
did it.
her. I learned from her PowerPoint, which she sent me, which was 12 slides. That was a history of the activity of becoming the Zero Waste Church, adopting it as a policy. That in 2013, so that's 9-10 years ago, there was a picnic, a big picnic, 400 people coming to the picnic. And she proposed to the picnic people that they try to do it as a zero waste. And she had already recruited a dozen volunteers to help make it happen. Well, the picnic people acceded, and she started in, and there were various rumbles about this is too hard. And of course, they were experimenting with how to do it because it's not obvious what you need to do. The three potential streams of compost, recyclable materials and non-recyclable and landfill things are the main sort of shape of the kind of thing you're trying to do. But how to have people understand what it is that they have to do is the major educational challenge. And one of the things that you're trying to do is to not have too much waste food. But at that first one, they had so many pounds of waste food, they didn't know what to do with. Well, they did know what to do with. They were going to put it in the compost. But it was an enormous amount of waste food that they didn't want to really have happen.
Right.
And then the question is, have you separated your compost into vegetable from the meat and other portions that are not safe to compost? And I don't know the answer to that in their case.
But that's another learning step,
learning
isn't
thing,
it?
right.
Yeah.
And they did succeed in getting the amount of landfill waste down to 4.5 pounds for the 450 people. So there's no comparison number to know how much it would have been other than the zero waste attempt. But it sounds like a not very big number. So
it does.
That's the illustration. And then one of the subsequent pictures in the PowerPoint show waste stations with the divisions, different cans for different things and signs. And part of the text says he enlists children in doing this. So the kids learn how to make the differences and help make signs. It was all done by a lay action, clergy not involved. It was, we're holding a picnic. The priests don't hold the picnic, the lay people hold the picnic, and the priests get to pray, but the way
anyone can
their
pray.
business. Anyone can pray. So there were various rough spots over the next several years in which people who were part of the staff have to become part of the project and had various habits and thoughts that made it difficult to proceed. But eventually the staff came on board, and the vestry in 2016, I believe, adopted the policy of becoming a zero waste church. Not that they already were a zero, but that was God's will, is to care for the planet in such a way that zero waste is a way to affirm that
I
care.
see.
And
so institutionally, there were some challenges because there were certain people in the infrastructure of the life of the church who were maybe wary of it or not on board, and so it took some education. And
I think it can be very hard on the sexton staff, the housekeeping staff of a building, to land this on them without having a very strong lay structure, which is not going to increase their work. And it may change it, but you certainly don't want to make it more, if only from your own budget point of view as a congregation. You like to keep your costs down, be slim, and the sexton shouldn't be doing a bunch of make work or things that just get invented. That's the people who are involved in living in this community who should be doing that.
Do you know if at St. Columba's there was any kind of broad education done with the congregation about why this would be a good thing or an important thing to do? No. Or was it sort of the mighty few who
do not know the answer to that. The education is mentioned in a couple of the slides, but there's no indication other than the mention of children as to any method and by which it was done.
Sure. Okay. If I have a magic wand over here on my shelf, actually. Oh, no, here it is. It's in my hand.
Wave it, it will happen.
So
Right,
it's got the sparkles. It's
right, and it's,
so I'm going to pass this to you, Bob,
all right.
metaphorically. This magic wand. I'm trying to do it on the screen here,
Yeah.
handing it over to you. And I'd love for you to wave the magic wand and decide or tell us, since you have the power of the magic wand, what would you like to see happen at St. Paul's Cathedral in Buffalo about this?
My hope is that I come back from Washington equipped with knowledge of how the project went forward, of some of the pitfalls and difficulties, and what it really looks like, and how much you really accomplished. Not, this has now been in place for some years at the parish, so you can't expect to have everything go perfectly. What are the places where it doesn't? Knowing that, I expect to come to the Social Justice Action Team meeting prepared with a report in which I would say what the pluses and minuses and what the goal, as I now understand it, because I think goals change when you learn things. Goals don't remain
Right.
exactly the same. They always have a different flavor, at least. And very often you change your mind about major parts of it.
Right.
And at the Social Justice Action Team, we'll talk about how to go about doing this at St. Paul's.
Mhm.
One of the lessons I can see right off the bat is lay leadership is essential. You don't have lay leadership, don't undertake it. The priests are not going to get it done, and neither is the housekeeping staff on its own.
Mhm.
How good-hearted they are.
Mhm. Mhm.
Too much involvement, too much education
Mhm.
involved.
One
And
of the
then,
things that, oh, go ahead.
okay,
You're still waving your wand. I'm sorry, I
yes,
interrupted
right.
there.
The one then goes on to say, have we talked about this enough? It may be more than one meeting after all,
Sure.
to begin to recommend it to people. And at some point, it will be appropriate to have the vestry endorse it as a policy. By the time we get to the vestry, I think we have to have a plan which describes how we're going to be doing it, and with enough trial run activity to make it real. So we have some idea of the costs, some idea of the people power required in order to do it, and we have to feel fired up. We no Holy Spirit shouldn't undertake. Don't undertake until the Holy Spirit has really got you.
That's right. Yes.
Enthusiastic about doing it.
Mhm.
And so
One of the things that comes to my mind, Bob, and stop me if I'm wrong about this, but it's not only about putting things in the correct bins for proper disposal, but for example, of course, COVID has shut down having coffee hours and so forth. But when we come out of that, is there any reason that we couldn't be using flatware and china dishes for rather than throw away plastic implements and plastic or styrofoam plates?
I would strongly support using the full set of china. I mean, we have enough china and flatware at St. Paul's Cathedral. We were blessed by the larger numbers of the past and by traditions of serving food. I mean, back in the 90s, we would have evening dinners, which were solidarity fundraising things, where we served 4-course meal in the Walker Room, sit down meal, and you'd have 50 people. And
Wow.
so we have enough of that to go around. And it's when you get to things like the outside picnics and the street people activity that it becomes much harder. You have to really think hard about how you would change in order to minimize or decrease the amount of, I think, starting in with thou shalt not have is a little too tough, and you just can't, you're gonna have to bend at some points.
Right. I mean, we can't
So,
have people anxious that they're going to get arrested by a member of the church for,
yeah, no,
you know,
no. And we already really have, in early explorations, secured agreement on the styrofoam cup problem, so that
oh, good.
some people have said, no, I'm gonna wash dishes, because that's the really, the current action that has to come forth, is that lay people have to say, oh, that's something I do. It's part of the food aspect of, fellowship. And
Right. Right.
that-
I have expertise in washing dishes. I've been doing them for decades.
I did it since I was a child. My father did dishes. He didn't cook, but he did dishes. So I have a terrific, childhood image of him doing
Yes.
dishes. And he
Yeah.
did it for the big gatherings we would have. He did dishes
Mhm,
too. So
mhm.
uh, it's a
So,
fun occupation. That you talk with people when you do it.
um, so there's so much of this that we have little control over. I mean, I went to the dentist yesterday for my routine cleaning and they sent me home. There was no lollipop. It was a new toothbrush and cardboard backing. Okay, I can put that in the recycle bin. Plastic cover. So,
I have one right here. This is a, a toothbrush. It was
yes,
one of those machine ones. My wife got it. It's got the plastic around it, and it's got the cardboard backing.
right.
It's a menace. It's a
Exact-
total menace.
So, I mean, there's, I think that there's things like that that we could just throw up our hands and feel hopeless of like, this is an unwinnable thing. But, as people of faith, we know that, Jesus was able to feed the 5,000 by, because Bob brought a peanut butter sandwich and Sarah didn't have one. So Bob kind of ripped it and said, well, would this help?
That
You know,
that is my belief about the feeding of the 5,000 was he opened their hearts, so they began sharing, and that's
right.
how
And
it was
so-
done. And
So what we can do, and offer it in faith. And so
And-
even if it's a little thing, it's still with a whole heart, we can do this.
right. And
And so your hope would be that we would talk about this at the Social Justice Action Team, and as the person who sets the agenda in consultation with members, I can confirm that we will do that.
we'll talk about it, right?
And then we would want to approach the vestry to, and maybe even begin conversations with vestry members ahead of time rather than just sort of lean.
You won't get rid of everything. One of the things that I found out myself doing now is talking to everyone who gives me one of these things about how bad it is and why can't we change this? And so I've already instituted the policy. When I go to my cafe, I no longer get a throwaway kind of thing, because I take my own bag and I take one of their former throwaways thing and reuse it.
That's
So
really inspired,
fight
Bob.
back. It's
It's really devoted of you to do that.
I have to keep thinking too, because there are things that you just at first you're so puzzled, you have no idea what you could do to combat this. But
What else do you think at this point would be important for us to know about the powers of your magic wand and your dream for St. Paul's Cathedral in Buffalo?
I think widening one's vision to the way in which life will have to change if we're going to continue to be on the planet, if we're going to continue to live what we could consider a good life. And widening your vision says, oh, the way we're living now is unsupportable. It can't go on. for generation after generation. So take some of the biblical numbers, like 7 generations, and think ahead to what you're doing now. 7 generations from now, do you want your great grandchildren to see this in the landfill still?
Right, the landfill
answer
in
is,
their own
of course
backyard
not.
because the landfills are growing. And
Growing and just,
that's, so thinking back to the St. Columba's in the DC area, I mean, that was really inspired to get children involved in the project because they are the generations to come, and they're probably learning about this stuff in school.
and you should make it a game. It should be a fun thing, a fun activity, it's not a punishment,
Right.
a joyous thing.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Bob. What a interesting, compelling conversation this has been. And I'm excited to see what you're going to learn and how the Holy Spirit's going to lead the Social Justice Action Team
Yes, I am.
into taking steps at St. Paul's Cathedral.
Thank you for talking with me.
You're welcome. My pleasure, as always.
Right.